Welcome to our channel. Today we delve into the riveting and dramatic world of Detroit's underground scene, focusing on the lives of Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown. Rising from the impoverished neighborhoods, these two men ascended to the pinnacle of a drug empire, becoming legendary figures on the streets of Detroit. Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown's journey from their early days in Paradise Valley to their peak in the 1970s unveils a story brimming with astounding wealth and opulent lifestyles, connections with renowned music stars and celebrities, intense confrontations with law enforcement and the mafia, surprising betrayals, and steadfast loyalties. However, beyond the thrilling narrative lies a profound exploration of America's complex history and the American dream, seen through the lens of a black family. Join us as we unfold the gripping tale of the Black Mafia family, a story that will linger in your thoughts long after it concludes. Our documentary, Motown Mafia, chronicles the rise of the Eddie Jackson organization from the late 60s to the late 70s. It revisits the key figures who shaped Detroit's streets and possibly inspired future legends like Big Meech. When questioned about ties to illegal drug trafficking, Eddie Jackson firmly denied any involvement. When asked about his business holdings and the source of his wealth, he responded, "If I tell you that, then you know my business." Big Meech, a product of Detroit, has profoundly influenced American culture in recent times. Now, 50 Cent is bringing his story to television. Motown Mafia provides a glimpse into the city and the individuals who laid the groundwork for Demetrius Big Meech, Flannery, a significant figure in urban culture today. In 1973, the Detroit Free Press proclaimed that the city's heroin kingpins seemed untouchable. Eddie the Fat Man Jackson and his right-hand man, Courtney the Field Marshal Brown, were among the most significant dealers, dominating Detroit's heroin market. Unlike their violent New York counterparts like Nicky Barnes and Frank Lucas, Jackson and Brown built their empire on family ties and strategic finesse, embodying the essence of the Motown Mafia. The story of Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown, along with their families, stretches from the 1960s to today. By 1969, Eddie Jackson had assembled a loyal group of lieutenants, including Charles Rudolph, Russell Clayton, Ronald Five, Zero Garrett, Black Butch, and his trustedly Courtney Brown. These men, who grew up together in Detroit's historic Black Bottom and Paradise Valley neighborhoods, laid a strong foundation for their burgeoning heroin empire. Paradise Valley, where Eddie Jackson and his crew were raised, was a vibrant community filled with musicians, entertainers, and a bustling nightlife. The saloons and nightclubs on Hastings Street were renowned nationwide, but urban renewal and new stadiums have since replaced them. During their upbringing, the neighborhood was the heart of a thriving community where essential needs like good housing, employment, and social relationships were met. It was a time when you could leave your doors open and neighbors watched out for each other. Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown first met in the late 1940s as young children and quickly developed a deep friendship. Eddie was about 5 or 6 years old, while Courtney was around 10. Their fathers stipulated that Eddie could only go out if Courtney was with him, fostering a brotherly bond that endured throughout their lives. Eddie Jackson's father, who had moved from the South in the 1920s, became a successful businessman in Paradise Valley. His achievements and reputation in the community had a profound influence on Eddie, who later built a heroin empire with a close-knit group of trusted allies from their neighborhood. Courtney was a constant presence in Eddie's life. Eddie Jackson's father, having fled the South in the 1920s due to legal issues, became a notable figure in Detroit's Paradise Valley. The importance of black entrepreneurship during this time cannot be understated. Eddie's father was one of the few black men to hold a B license to sell wine during the war, despite not being able to sell liquor. Originally from Hot Springs, Arkansas, he reinvented himself in Detroit, possibly having a violent past behind him. Black men like Mr. Jackson were pillars of the community, running legitimate businesses alongside underground operations, like the numbers game. His fortune began with homemade liquor sales, which he later invested in real estate. Paradise Valley in the 1950s was relatively safe, but managed a thriving underground economy. The area also had its red light districts, where drug addiction, alcoholism, and gambling were rampant. Yet it was a well-balanced community, despite the hardships. By the early 1960s, urban renewal projects began dismantling the historic neighborhoods of Paradise Valley and Black Bottom in Detroit. Eddie Jackson and his brother Elijah inherited their father's pool hall after his death, while their friend Charles Rudolph joined the military. In contrast, Courtney Brown settled into a more conventional life, getting married in 1961 and starting a family. Despite the city's looming economic decline, Eddie Jackson's fortunes were on the rise. By 1967, Detroit's social structures were unraveling, marking the start of its downward spiral. Eddie, however, was poised to exploit the changing landscape. The 1960s transformation of Detroit, especially following the 1967 riot, significantly impacted the city's social and economic environment. The riot, one of the most severe in U.S. history, exacerbated unemployment and urban decay. This period also saw an increase in heroin use, driven by returning soldiers who had developed addictions overseas, where the drug was highly potent. Eddie Jackson, who had inherited a substantial sum from his father, saw his wealth diminish by 1969 due to a lavish lifestyle. Injured while working at an auto plant and frustrated by the lack of insurance compensation, Eddie sought help from his childhood friend, Courtney Brown. Together, they secured a disability settlement, which Eddie quickly invested in the heroin trade. Despite initial setbacks, including being swindled by others and losing money, Eddie persisted. He and Courtney began by selling small quantities around a pool room. After several months, Eddie had another run-in with financial difficulties, but managed to recover by reinvesting his income tax return into the business. Their first significant breakthrough came when a local junkie named Box introduced Eddie to John Claxton, a major figure in Detroit's drug underworld. This connection provided Eddie with high-quality heroin, which significantly boosted his operation. Soon, Eddie's business flourished, and he was seen driving a brand-new red convertible Cadillac, a symbol of his growing success. Courtney, witnessing Eddie's rising fortune, decided to join him more actively. They acquired an apartment building on Hancock Street, which became the headquarters for their expanding enterprise. The building quickly turned into one of Detroit's busiest heroin spots, with Courtney managing the operations and ensuring smooth transactions. Eddie's approach to the drug trade was notably different from others. He emphasized excellent customer service and avoided violence, focusing instead on building a well-organized and efficient operation. This strategy paid off, allowing Eddie and his crew to make substantial profits while maintaining a relatively low profile. Eddie Jackson and his crew were known for their shrewd and strategic business practices, which included bribing local police officers to ensure protection and avoid significant legal troubles. The strategy paid off when they were forewarned about a federal raid. To mislead the authorities, they left only a minimal amount of diluted heroin at their headquarters, making their operation seem insignificant. Jackson's sharp business acumen and strategic foresight distinguished him in Detroit's drug landscape. He skillfully navigated the complexities of the trade, garnering a reputation for loyalty and minimizing violence, which made him a respected figure in the city's underworld. Despite numerous challenges, including being sold mixed heroin at a high price, Eddie continued to push forward. He wisely reinvested his income tax return into another small batch of heroin, which eventually started to turn a profit, demonstrating his resilience and determination. I once visited Eddie when a heroin dealer named Young Blood was at his house. Young Blood, who drove an Eldorado and owned a grocery store, was snorting heroin. Eddie noticed me, saying not to look at him like I was crazy. I was there helping cap up dollar caps, which were also called penny caps at the time. In the late 60s, although the Italian Mafia still controlled Detroit's heroin trade, black dealers like Henry Marzette began to establish their own operations. Marzette was a former police officer who became a significant figure in the drug trade after being kicked off the force for shaking down numbers operators and drug dealers. He was known as the first urban godfather in Detroit. I knew many of these individuals even if I didn't like them. My involvement in the drug scene included witnessing the darker aspects like murder and kidnapping. Marzette, leveraging his knowledge from his time on the police force, applied it to build his own empire. As a young man, I had a memorable encounter with Henry Marzette on Washington Boulevard. My uncle, a significant figure in the drug scene, introduced me to Marzette, who left a lasting impression. He drove a sleek, black Fleetwood Cadillac and often wore house shoes. Marzette gave me money for school, stressing that it should be used for education and not for getting into trouble. Marzette was a foundational figure in Detroit's drug trade, setting the stage for future generations and reshaping the city's underground economy. His influence was profound, and he played a pivotal role in the development of the drug market in Detroit. Eddie Jackson's rise in the drug trade began when he met John Claxton, a key figure in Detroit's underworld. While Marzette had the name, Claxton had the substantial connections. The Italian Mafia had long been the primary wholesalers in Detroit, with figures like Giovanni Prola and Raphael Jimmy the Goon Quasarano having strong ties to Sicily and the French connection. Claxton fed high-quality heroin through Sam the Mustache Norber, a remnant of Detroit's infamous Jewish Purple Gang, provided Eddie with some of the best dope in the city. In 1969, Eddie caught a significant break. A junkie named Box, an average guy who knew Claxton, claimed he could introduce Eddie to someone big. Skeptical at first, Eddie eventually met Claxton, who had just purchased a $40,000 house in Palmer Park. Claxton supplied Eddie with high-quality heroin, which Eddie initially mistook for sugar or flour. Fascinated, Eddie and his team began capping up the heroin into penny caps and selling them for $1 each. With Claxton's supply, Eddie's operation quickly expanded, establishing him as a significant figure in Detroit's drug trade. He was recognized for his strategic and customer-centric approach, which set him apart from others in the business. Eddie's newfound success was evident as he cruised the streets in a brand-new red convertible Cadillac. I recall working at a gas station on Gratiot and Madison when Eddie would pull up in his flashy Cadillacs. Every young black man aspired to drive a Cadillac back then. I'd joke with Eddie about hustling together, but he'd always remind me that my mother would kill him if he let me join. One memorable day, Eddie drove around in a 1969 red Cadillac convertible, a car he had picked out at a dealership on Grand River. At the time, I couldn't fathom making enough money to buy such a vehicle, but Eddie, always thinking big, had already purchased it for $6,900 in cash from Coffee Cadillac. Eddie's business acumen and Claxton's high-quality product made his operation thrive. Courtney Brown, seeing Eddie's success, decided to moonlight with him while maintaining his day job. After his parents separated, Courtney lived with his father on Mark Twain Street. One morning, he overheard men talking in the kitchen and saw a pile of white powder on the table, although he didn't know what it was at the time. Eddie soon tasked Courtney with finding an apartment building to serve as their headquarters. Courtney located a suitable building on Hancock Street in Midtown Detroit. As the business grew, they set up operations there, selling heroin in quarters. The Hancock building quickly became one of Detroit's busiest drug spots. During my shifts, I would open the door for customers, take their money, and pass it through a chute upstairs. The heroin would then be dropped down through a pipe in the ceiling, right in front of the door for the customer to pick up. I never handed the product directly to anyone, maintaining a streamlined and efficient system. As Detroit's crime rates surged, the Hancock Building became a central hub for heroin distribution, showcasing Eddie Jackson's strategic and organized approach to the drug trade. I never directly handed out any product. My role was to open the door, let the customers in, take their money, and then pass it through a chute upstairs. The heroin would be dropped down through a pipe in the ceiling, landing right in front of the door for the customer to pick up. This streamlined system ensured efficiency and minimized direct contact. My father was the caretaker of the Hancock Street building, and I often visited him there. During my visits, Courtney Brown and Eddie Jackson were frequently in and out of the building. They eventually gave me a job. After school, I would vacuum the floors, tidy up the building, and help cap penny caps downstairs. These caps, also known as doll caps, were sold at the back door, while larger quantities were sold at the front. For the first time, we began to see money that exceeded what pimps were making. Young black men started driving Mercedes, Benzes, and occasionally even Rolls Royces. My father always warned me not to go into the basement, but my curiosity got the better of me. When I finally ventured down there, I saw bags full of money and brown packages of heroin. In 1969, the first time we made $1,000 in a single day, we felt like we had achieved something significant. The Hancock Building was bustling, and I saw people coming in to get entire bags full of heroin. Eddie Jackson's approach to the drug trade was markedly different from others. Customer service was his top priority, and he strictly controlled security. Only one person was allowed in at a time to make a purchase, which minimized the risk of robbery. On average, we were making $10,000 a day, and on weekends, this number could rise to $15,000. We had people working in shifts, just like they would in a regular job, complete with paid vacations and overtime. My father would occasionally call me to run errands for Eddie, who would generously tip me $100 for fetching something as simple as an orange soda. The business thrived, and an arrangement was made with the 13th Police Precinct to provide protection from raids in exchange for a share of the drug proceeds. This arrangement paid off when Eddie and Courtney received a tip from the Detroit police about an impending federal raid. To mislead the authorities, they left a small amount of diluted heroin at the headquarters, making the operation appear insignificant. Eddie Jackson's strategic mindset and nonviolent approach distinguished him in Detroit's drug trade. He prioritized customer service and operational efficiency, leading to substantial success despite numerous obstacles. Eddie implemented a business model that included paid vacations and overtime for his workers, who operated in shifts like in any legitimate business. My father often received calls asking me to run errands for Eddie, such as fetching an orange soda, for which Eddie would generously tip $100. As their business grew, they entered into an arrangement with the 13th Police Precinct, providing protection from raids in exchange for a share of the profits. This arrangement proved beneficial when the Detroit police tipped off Eddie and Courtney about an impending federal raid. To deceive the feds, they left only a small amount of diluted heroin at their headquarters, making their operation appear insignificant. When the raid occurred, the authorities found only the planted packs and released the workers, assuming they were just small-time operators. Eddie's intelligence and strategic thinking set him apart. He knew how to move his product and maintain crucial connections. For the first time, young black men saw an alternative path to success, viewing Eddie not just as a drug dealer, but as a businessman and a thinker. Eddie's business acumen was evident in his interactions and operations. He was always calm, never confrontational, and managed a well-oiled machine. People respected him as a great businessman, a trait he inherited from his father. Eddie's deep understanding of human nature was a key factor in his success. He emphasized treating customers with respect, regardless of their financial situation, and maintained a strict policy against exploiting customers for sexual favors. As the profits rolled in, Courtney Brown initially returned to a conventional job but soon rejoined Eddie Jackson to help manage the expanding enterprise. Eddie, known for his loyalty, assured Courtney not to worry about financial concerns, highlighting his unwavering support for his team. Eddie was a natural facilitator, often seen calmly giving directions and managing his operations with precision. He was a man who avoided confrontations, always maintaining his composure. People respected Eddie, not just for his business acumen, which he inherited from his father, but also for his deep understanding of human nature. Eddie had a strict policy of treating customers with respect. He believed in taking whatever money the customers had, without exploiting or mistreating them. His philosophy was simple. As long as he received 95% of the money, he was content. This approach likely helped him avoid many of the pitfalls that ensnared other drug dealers. Eddie's business model included a strict no harassment policy. Customers were never degraded or asked for sexual favors in exchange for drugs. If a woman came in without money, she would not be exploited. This respectful approach not only garnered customer loyalty, but also minimized conflicts. As the operation flourished, Courtney Brown decided to leave his job and fully commit to the enterprise. Eddie's success was evident, and by 1970, he was one of the biggest dealers in Detroit. Courtney, however, began to tire of the street life, reflecting on his future as their business continued to grow. Feeling the weight of his choices, Courtney returned to his job as a bus driver. He bought a house on Mark Twain Street and tried to distance himself from the drug trade. For an entire year, he stayed away from Eddie and the operations. By 1970, Eddie had solidified his position as one of Detroit's leading drug dealers, and Courtney's disillusionment with the street life grew stronger. Around Halloween of 1970, Courtney found himself at a crossroads. He contemplated whether to continue his legitimate job or return to hustling with Eddie. Ultimately, he decided to reconnect with Eddie, who assured him that he could help manage the crew, including Rudolph, Russell, and Fire O. Eddie promised to support Courtney, even offering to help with his overdue house payments. During this period, the streets were buzzing with activity, and everyone involved in the drug trade was making substantial money. Eddie's operation was thriving, and they were known for their ability to mix heroin effectively, turning 1 kilogram into 9. This practice significantly boosted their profits. As Courtney rejoined Eddie Jackson's crew, a pivotal moment occurred. John Claxton, Eddie's primary heroin supplier, faced indictment and fled Detroit, becoming one of the DEA's most wanted fugitives. This left a significant gap in their supply chain. Eddie briefly dealt with Claxton's wife, but knew he needed a new, reliable source to sustain their operation. Eddie's strategic acumen quickly came into play. Around the same time, Muhammad Ali had just been granted his license to fight again, and there was a buzz about his upcoming match in New York. Eddie, always the showman, dressed impeccably and drove his Fleetwood Brougham to Madison Square Garden. His entourage made such an impression that Ebony magazine featured a photo of them alongside the infamous shot of Frank Lucas in his chinchilla hat. It was in New York that Eddie had a serendipitous encounter with members of the Bronx-based Gambino crew, who were key players in distributing heroin from the French Connection. Recognizing mutual business opportunities, they proposed selling heroin to Eddie for $16,000 per kilogram. Eddie, seizing the opportunity, sent Dolph to New York with $50,000 to purchase 3 kilograms of heroin, thus forging one of the most significant connections of the golden age of heroin. With their new supply secured, Eddie and Courtney began flooding Detroit streets with high-quality heroin. This operation was so smooth that transporting millions of dollars worth of heroin from New York to Detroit became routine. Eddie's organization was well protected and efficient, ensuring no issues during transit. Eddie Jackson maintained unwavering loyalty to his childhood friends, including Rudolph, Courtney, and Russell, who played key roles in his drug operation. His innate ability to inspire and understand people enabled him to forge a devoted and efficient team. Eddie often motivated his dealers by providing them with larger quantities of heroin, which not only boosted their morale, but also increased their profits. As Eddie's wealth grew, so did his legend. His strategic acumen and charismatic leadership earned him immense respect in Detroit's underground scene, solidifying his reputation as a drug kingpin. Eddie was a people person, I recalled. He genuinely loved his audience, which included his customers, their families, and even those who weren't his clients. All you had to do was catch him on the right day to witness something extraordinary, something you might never see again in your lifetime. When questioned about his ties to illegal drug trafficking, Eddie flatly denied any involvement. "Yes, I do deny it," he stated firmly. He was equally evasive about revealing the specifics of his business holdings and the source of his wealth. "It's a matter of record," he would say, leaving it to others to investigate. When pressed further, he would respond, "If I tell you that, then you'll know my business." Many stories about Eddie's exploits were shared among his friends and associates. He was often bashful about recounting his adventures, letting others tell the tales while he sat back, a modest smile on his face. "Did you really do that, Poe?" people would ask, and he would nod, sometimes reluctantly confirming the stories. Eddie's charisma was undeniable. He had a magnetic personality that drew people in, and his flashy style, complete with a super fly hairstyle, made him a larger-than-life figure. While President Richard Nixon believed he had the country's drug problem under control, Eddie Jackson remained a formidable force in Detroit. Eddie and his crew sat atop the city's drug hierarchy, with many others relying on his supply chain. Everyone in the city knew Eddie Jackson, I recalled. He was at the pinnacle. Eddie's charisma and leadership were legendary. Eddie was incredibly charismatic, his right-hand man noted. "No one has matched Eddie Jackson since he left the scene." Eddie's presence was unforgettable. He would often visit places I frequented, buying everyone whatever they wanted and giving us money to do the same. He'd open up the craps table, gamble with us, and even if he won everything, he'd return the money and leave with a smile. When Eddie went out, he did it in style, taking hundreds of people with him and spending lavishly. Nobody ever felt left out or hungry around Eddie. Eddie was an entertainer at heart. He'd drive through the streets with bags full of $1 bills, tossing them out the window. Down in the Brewster projects, he'd ride down John R. Street, throwing money out the car window. People would go wild, grabbing the bills, causing a stampede. Eddie's generosity was unmatched. He kept $100 bills in his pocket and would often ask people if they were okay. If someone said they were fine, he'd still hand them money from his pocket, never knowing how much he might give. This generosity created a sense of community and loyalty among his customers, who he deeply appreciated. Eddie Jackson and his crew epitomized a new wave of entrepreneurship, making their presence felt at high-profile events like the Ali and Frazier fights. They traveled extensively, a rare occurrence at the time, breaking the mold of traditional trips to nearby cities like Chicago or Alabama. This shift wasn't just about making money. It was about transforming lifestyles. Young men flush with drug money began traveling to exotic locales such as the Bahamas, a stark contrast to their previous experiences. Eddie Jackson was more than just a drug dealer. He was a larger-than-life figure who left an indelible mark on Detroit's history. His team was pioneering in their approach, going so far as to travel overseas, which was almost unheard of in the black community at that time. They ventured to places like Amsterdam and France, and even explored South America from Rio de Janeiro up to the Panama Canal. Eddie and a few close associates were among the first to embrace this globe-trotting lifestyle, often mistaken for entertainers due to their impeccable dress and extravagant jewelry. By 1971, Eddie and Courtney's crew had become legendary. Courtney once encountered Donald Goins, a prolific black author and Detroit native, who was also a heroin addict. Goins acknowledged that the streets of Detroit recognized Eddie Jackson and his crew as the best in the heroin game. Many events in Goins' novels were inspired by the real-life exploits of Eddie and his team. Goins, coming from an old-school background, had seen it all, from Marzette to Nick, the Greek to John Claxton, and declared Eddie's crew as number one. During its peak, the Jackson organization, connected to the French Connection heroin pipeline, operated at the highest echelons of the drug world. This era was marked by a new breed of businessmen who, despite their ruthless tactics, were fundamentally entrepreneurs, much like Al Capone during Prohibition. Among these influential figures were Nicky Barnes, Frank Matthews, and Frank Lucas's supplier Ike Atkinson. Eddie Jackson emerged as one of the most powerful black gangsters in the country, dealing with few but notable individuals like Frank Matthews and the infamous F. Goldfinger by September 1971. The Jackson organization faced its first significant setback when Eddie's girlfriend, Fay Lee, was spotted at an airport, traveling with two men and a substantial sum of cash, destined for New York. An airport clerk tipped off the DIA about the trio carrying large amounts of money. Fay called to inform Eddie that she had the package and was advised to avoid returning to the airport. However, she was apprehended with 2 kilos of heroin. Despite her refusal to cooperate, one of her companions, Reynolds, revealed to the D that she was working for Eddie Jackson and that the heroin was his. With Fay Lee incarcerated and Eddie now on the radar of federal drug agents, Courtney Brown, the field marshal, was sent to New York to handle the situation. When Eddie attempted to post her bond, he was told that an additional $50,000 was required for her release to ensure her safety. Eddie complied, and after obtaining the money from Detroit, Fay Lee was released on bond, thanks to the legal efforts of F. Lee Bailey's partner, H. Ross Black. Despite this, Eddie Jackson and his crew remained under intense federal scrutiny. As pressure from authorities mounted, Eddie Jackson decided to shift his focus from street-level retail to larger-scale wholesale distribution. He organized a pivotal meeting at Courtney Brown's house, attended by key associates such as Charles Rudolph and Ronald Garrett. During the meeting, Eddie announced his plan to exit the retail side of the business, allowing his lieutenants to run their own independent operations. As a gesture of gratitude for their loyalty and hard work, he offered each of them $10,000. Eddie also gave Courtney the choice to either continue working with him or to become his own boss. This strategic withdrawal marked a significant shift in their operational focus, aimed at reducing exposure and concentrating on more substantial transactions. Eddie and his associates quickly adapted to their new roles. Ronald Garrett, known for his aggressive and often reckless behavior, set up his own operation. Despite the frequent conflicts and price wars that ensued, both Eddie and Ronald's businesses flourished. Eddie's organization began grossing approximately $2 million a month, which would be over $10 million in today's dollars. Meanwhile, Rudolph was responsible for transporting large quantities of heroin and collecting money in return, often dealing with amounts exceeding $50,000 a day. By this time, Eddie's operation had surpassed all others in Detroit. They could distribute 10 kilos of heroin at once, and it would be weeks before they needed to collect the money and provide another shipment. This insulation from street-level activities allowed Eddie and Courtney to spend more time with their families and socialize with prominent black celebrities who passed through Detroit during the Motown era. Despite the glamorous lifestyle and high-profile connections, Eddie remained cautious about public perception. When asked about his luxurious lifestyle and supposed posh fortress, he downplayed the extravagance, focusing instead on the essential aspects of their operations and relationships. Eddie Jackson's magnetic world drew in famous entertainers like the OGs and Phyllis Hyman, who frequently attended his exclusive parties. Comedy legend Red Fox was also among those who experienced Eddie's unique hospitality, highlighting the influence and charm of Detroit's underground elite. Eddie Jackson's strategic acumen and adaptability allowed his empire to flourish. By focusing on wholesale distribution and maintaining a network of loyal lieutenants, Eddie minimized his exposure to law enforcement while ensuring his organization's success. An intriguing aspect of Eddie's influence was his connection to the music industry. It was rumored that 80% of Motown's music during that era was created under the influence of drugs supplied by Eddie. When entertainers like Richard Pryor, the Ojus, and Eddie Kendricks visited Detroit, they were often provided with free cocaine, supplied by Eddie and his crew. Eddie and his associates would purchase 2 to 3 kilos of cocaine just for personal use, cementing their status as key figures in the entertainment scene. By this time, Eddie had become a celebrity in his own right, often seen gliding through the streets like a movie star. He mingled with stylish and influential men who were part of Berry Gordy's Motown, including songwriters like Holland. This era was characterized by a focus on fashion, luxury, and enjoying life, rather than territorial disputes. While Eddie Jackson's organization operated with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 company, many of Detroit's other dealers were more preoccupied with violence than profit. The early 1970s saw a dramatic rise in crime, with Detroit earning the notorious title of murder capital. By 1972, the city's murder rate had soared, surpassing New York and Chicago, and quadrupling that of some other cities. An intense drug war ensued, with drug pushers and killers becoming infamous figures in the city's underworld. In summary, Eddie Jackson's reign in Detroit's drug trade was characterized by strategic brilliance, influential connections in the music industry, and a focus on maintaining a profitable and organized operation. He left an indelible mark on Detroit's history, blending the allure of celebrity with the harsh realities of the drug trade. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Eddie Jackson avoided violence and instead cultivated a reputation as a gentleman gangster. He was street-savvy, politically astute, and knew how to make the right connections to keep his business thriving. His approach minimized conflict and kept him out of the violent confrontations that plagued other dealers. However, the drug trade in Detroit was fraught with danger. Eddie and his associates, including Charles Rudolph and Courtney Brown, were prepared to deal with any threats. There were instances where Eddie had to assert his dominance to protect his interests. Notably, he dealt decisively with those who attempted to rob him, demonstrating that, while he preferred diplomacy, he was not afraid to take action when necessary. Eddie Jackson became an urban legend, admired and emulated by younger generations who saw him as a role model. His style and demeanor influenced many, and he was regarded as the epitome of a successful hustler who made it big without resorting to gratuitous violence. In his dealings, Eddie emphasized respect and professionalism. He viewed himself as a businessman who happened to sell drugs rather than a violent criminal. This perspective allowed him to maintain a certain level of decorum and respectability, even within the underworld. While Eddie and Courtney managed to avoid much of the violence, they were always aware of the dangers lurking in Murder City. They navigated these perils with a combination of strategic alliances and readiness to defend themselves, solidifying their status as key players in Detroit's drug scene. Eddie Jackson's legacy is defined by his strategic brilliance, resilience, and ability to navigate both high society and the gritty streets of Detroit. His story exemplifies the complexities of the drug trade and the multifaceted nature of those who rise to the top in such a perilous environment. In December 1971, Eddie and Courtney received a major shipment of heroin from New York. On December 14th, the Italians confirmed that everything was set. Eddie and Courtney planned their next moves, deciding against returning to a known address on Hubble Street. Unbeknownst to them, they had been under constant surveillance since an arrest at the airport 3 months earlier involving 2 kilos of pure heroin. Shipment included 12 kilos of heroin, which they intended to cut tenfold, resulting in 120 kilos of product. As they began processing the pure heroin, federal agents raided their stash house on the 19,000 block of Hubble in northwest Detroit. This operation led to the largest heroin seizure in Michigan's history at that time, 22 kilos of heroin. The raid was chaotic, with agents needing gas masks due to the potency of the drugs. Eddie managed to bail everyone out, including himself, after the arrest. However, their troubles were far from over. In January 1972, a grand jury handed down a massive 32-person indictment against Eddie's crew. Eddie hired renowned civil rights attorney Milton Henry, who had been an advisor to Malcolm X, to lead their defense. Despite the charges, Eddie remained undeterred, showcasing his strategic acumen and commitment to his associates by bailing out all 32 co-defendants with his own money. Despite numerous challenges, Eddie Jackson's intelligence and strategic thinking were evident throughout his career. He adeptly managed to move his product, maintain critical connections, and navigate legal obstacles, all while treating his customers with respect and avoiding unnecessary violence. Eddie's story transcends the drug trade. It highlights a man who saw an alternative path to success and pursued it with unwavering determination. Interestingly, the Jackson organization thrived even under legal scrutiny. Eddie faced multiple indictments, yet he maintained his status as the biggest wholesale drug dealer in Detroit and possibly the entire Midwest. This resilience speaks volumes about his business acumen and strategic foresight. At one point, the organization faced a significant bust that temporarily disrupted their operations. Initially, fear gripped their network, making it difficult to sell anything. However, Eddie's perseverance paid off. He soon delivered $60,000 to his associate, demonstrating that their business was back on track. Despite the legal troubles 1972 and 1973 became some of the most profitable years for the Jackson crew. Eddie's success allowed him to invest in an upscale lifestyle. He purchased and renovated a home in Southfield, one of Detroit's most exclusive suburbs at the time, predominantly Jewish. Eddie wanted to make a statement with his move, ensuring that his presence in Southfield was noticed. He encouraged his partner Courtney to join him in Southfield, offering him a share of the profits instead of a salary, thus making Courtney an official partner in the business. Courtney, initially hesitant due to financial concerns, accepted the offer and moved to Southfield. The move was a significant upgrade from their previous living conditions. Eddie's home featured luxurious amenities, including an Olympic-sized swimming pool and high-end interior decorations. This new environment was a stark contrast to their past, symbolizing their rise in social status. While Eddie Jackson concentrated on expanding their drug enterprise, Courtney Brown managed to balance his involvement in the illegal trade with a strong commitment to his family. The luxurious lifestyle they led was a testament to their strategic planning and immense success. Eddie's home, adorned with yellow carpets, blue furniture, and a black baby grand piano, created a lavish and enchanting atmosphere for visitors. Eddie Jackson and his organization exemplified resilience and strategic thinking, showcasing a unique kind of success that diverged from the norm. Their story is a compelling chapter in Detroit's history, highlighting the complexities and contradictions of their rise to power. Growing up in such an environment was surreal. The community was tight-knit, with notable figures like Smokey Robinson and members of the Temptations living nearby. Despite their involvement in the drug trade, Eddie and Courtney maintained a facade of normalcy. Family members rarely saw any drugs or illegal activities. Instead, they witnessed a constant flow of money. The sense of opulence was overwhelming. Money was a constant presence, often stacked in large amounts, creating an atmosphere of endless possibility and indulgence. Even as children, they understood that their wants and desires could be easily fulfilled. A memorable incident occurred when Joe Weaver, a close associate, arrived at the house with none other than Muhammad Ali. Despite the legendary boxer's presence, Eddie's father, who was asleep, dismissed the visit, illustrating the nonchalant attitude towards their extraordinary lifestyle. The next morning, Joe Weaver returned with photos of Ali, adding to the surreal nature of their lives. The drug trade's complexities eventually led to tensions. Eddie and Courtney began facing issues when they started dealing with larger quantities of cocaine. This shift brought new challenges and dynamics to their operation, adding layers to their already intricate story. Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown's story is a compelling narrative of ambition, resilience, and strategic intelligence. Their rise from the impoverished neighborhoods of Detroit to the apex of a drug empire illustrates their exceptional ability to navigate a challenging environment while maintaining a semblance of normalcy for their families. Eddie Jackson, often referred to as the Fat Man, and his close associate Courtney the Field Marshal Brown began their journey in the historic neighborhoods of Paradise Valley and Black Bottom. These areas were once vibrant communities filled with musicians, entertainers, and a bustling nightlife. But urban renewal projects in the early 1960s began to dismantle these neighborhoods. Eddie and Courtney's friendship was forged in their youth, with Eddie looking up to the slightly older Courtney. Eddie's father, a successful businessman who had moved from the South in the 1920s, played a significant role in shaping Eddie's entrepreneurial spirit. Despite the challenges of growing up in a tough neighborhood, Eddie and Courtney built a bond that would last a lifetime. By the late 1960s, Detroit was undergoing significant social and economic changes. Exacerbated by the 1967 riot, one of the most severe in U.S. history, this period saw an increase in heroin use, driven by returning soldiers who had developed addictions overseas. Eddie, who had inherited a substantial sum from his father, saw his wealth diminish due to a lavish lifestyle. Frustrated by his financial situation, Eddie sought help from Courtney, and together they ventured into the heroin trade. Their initial foray into the drug business was fraught with challenges, including being swindled and losing money. However, their persistence paid off when a local junkie introduced Eddie to John Claxton, a key figure in Detroit's drug underworld. Claxton supplied Eddie with high-quality heroin, which significantly boosted their operation. Soon, Eddie's business flourished, symbolized by his brand-new red convertible Cadillac. Courtney, witnessing Eddie's success, decided to join him more actively. They acquired an apartment building on Hancock Street, which became the headquarters for their expanding enterprise. The building quickly turned into one of Detroit's busiest heroin spots, with Courtney managing the operations and ensuring smooth transactions. Eddie's approach to the drug trade was notably different from others. He emphasized excellent customer service and avoided violence, focusing instead on building a well-organized and efficient operation. The strategy paid off, allowing Eddie and his crew to make substantial profits while maintaining a relatively low profile. The business model included a strict no-harassment policy. Customers were never degraded or asked for sexual favors in exchange for drugs. This respectful approach garnered customer loyalty and minimized conflicts. Eddie also implemented a system where workers operated in shifts, complete with paid vacations and overtime, mimicking a legitimate business. Eddie's strategic acumen extended to his dealings with law enforcement. He and Courtney entered into an arrangement with the 13th Police Precinct, providing protection from raids in exchange for a share of the profits. This arrangement proved beneficial when the Detroit police tipped them off about an impending federal raid. To deceive the authorities, they left a small amount of diluted heroin at their headquarters, making the operation appear insignificant. Despite numerous challenges, including being pulled over with significant quantities of drugs, Eddie's connections and strategic thinking often helped them navigate legal troubles. For instance, Milton Henry, a lawyer, managed to get Eddie out of a serious jam in Pennsylvania, where state police had found 11 pounds of heroin and 3 kilos of cocaine in the trunk of a car. Throughout their rise, Eddie and Courtney managed to maintain a semblance of normalcy for their families. Eddie, in particular, was known for his involvement in the community, coaching Little League baseball and basketball teams. Many neighborhood kids remembered him as a supportive figure who encouraged them to stay active and out of trouble. The story of Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown is not merely about their involvement in the drug trade. It is a narrative filled with deep friendships, family loyalty, and a strong commitment to their community. Despite the challenging environment they operated in, they managed to thrive while maintaining their integrity and strategic brilliance. Eddie and Courtney's journey to the top of Detroit's drug empire was fraught with obstacles and triumphs. Their rise to prominence was marked by their ability to navigate the complexities of the drug trade with intelligence and foresight. Eddie's unique approach to business set him apart from others in the trade. He emphasized customer service and operational efficiency, avoiding violence and building a well-organized operation. By 1973, their success had captured the attention of the authorities. The Detroit newspapers prominently featured Eddie and Courtney on the front page, labeling them as two of the city's leading drug kingpins. The headlines shattered any illusions of their new suburban lifestyle, exposing their lavish homes and luxurious lifestyles to the public. One memorable morning, on his way to school, a young boy picked up the newspaper and saw the front page story. The captions read, "Kingpin Eddie Jackson lives in the lap of luxury," with a picture of Eddie's house and his chief associate Courtney Brown's house. The boy quickly realized that everyone else had read the same story, and the implications of the federal investigation loomed large. Despite running a significant operation, Eddie managed to avoid indictment, a testament to the strategic brilliance of his business model. Courtney, too, faced scrutiny when he attempted to enroll his daughter in an elite private school. School administration was well aware of his background, presenting him with headlines labeling him a drug kingpin. Courtney, determined to protect his daughter from harassment, asserted his right to provide her with the best education, regardless of his past. Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown's success wasn't limited to their business ventures. It extended to their personal lives and how they cared for their families. One memorable Christmas, Eddie and Courtney took their children to Toys R Us, allowing them to pick out anything they wanted without any restrictions. This gesture underscored their commitment to ensuring their children enjoyed the best possible life, contrasting sharply with the typical holiday experience. Their story is a testament to resilience, loyalty, and strategic brilliance. Despite the challenging environment they operated in, Eddie and Courtney managed to maintain their integrity and thrive. They navigated their circumstances with a level of strategic acumen that set them apart from others. Eddie and Courtney's generosity was evident not just during Christmas. On weekends, Eddie's younger siblings would visit their home and return with bikes, bags of clothes, and other gifts, leaving them feeling like they had been shopping at Macy's. Eddie's father, a man of both kindness and caution, would hand out candy on Halloween while keeping a pistol at the bottom of the treat bag, reflecting the duality of their lives. The legal battles for Eddie and his associates culminated with nearly 30 of the 32 defendants being convicted on various charges. However, legal maneuverings by Milton Henry kept them free on appeal bond, allowing them to continue their activities. In 1975, Eddie and Black Butch were arrested in Las Vegas for violating their bond terms. Eddie eventually turned himself in on April 1, 1977, receiving a 30-year sentence, while Courtney was sentenced to 21 years. Both men were sent to Atlanta Penitentiary, known for its hardcore environment. Eddie and Courtney later ended up in Leavenworth, a prison infamous for its high walls and grim conditions. Despite the harsh reality, their legal efforts continued from behind bars. Eddie was released in 1984, followed by Courtney shortly after. Upon their release, Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown found a transformed Detroit. The city had grown more violent, dominated by a new generation of teenage drug dealers like those from Young Boys Incorporated. The once established honor codes of the underworld had eroded, replaced by chaos and unpredictability. Their journey from the apex of their empire to their eventual release from prison is a testament to their resilience and adaptability. It is a complex narrative interwoven with ambition, family loyalty, and the stark realities of life in Detroit's underground. Unlike their time, the current drug scene lacked strong leadership and significant connections. Many dealers were local, without the extensive networks that Eddie once had. The drug trade had become disorganized, reflecting broader societal changes. After just 18 months of freedom, Eddie Jackson was arrested again in a major indictment and sent back to prison for heroin distribution. Courtney Brown managed to keep a lower profile, but remained influential, with his son, Courtney Jr., beginning to learn more about the family's operations. By the time his father was released in 1984, Courtney Jr. was starting college. His father believed that with the right education and connections, one could make as much money legitimately as in the drug trade. This duality became evident to Courtney Jr. during the late 1980s, as he ran errands for his father and gained insights into the workings of the world. Courtney Jr. once visited New York to meet some banking contacts on 6th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. The office appeared to be a legitimate brokerage firm, complete with fancy offices, secretaries, and stock market machines. However, behind this facade, a few old men orchestrated money laundering for clients from Israel, South America, West Africa, and more. They would take large sums of cash and issue checks from seemingly legitimate companies. Courtney Jr.'s experiences vividly illustrated the fine line between corporate America and the narcotics world. As he attended business and economics classes, he became acutely aware of the formal education system's hypocrisy, which often overlooked the reality of the underground economy. Courtney Jr. eventually found success as a retailer and real estate developer, proving that the lessons learned from his father's endeavors could be applied to legitimate business ventures. His sister, a lawyer, exemplified how many entrepreneurs start their businesses with savings or financial support from family and relatives. In Courtney Jr.'s case, he sought his father's assistance to open a store in Harlem. Fortunately, his father had the resources to help, enabling him to live what he described as a poor man's puffy lifestyle. At 27 years old, Courtney Jr. owned a store across from the Apollo Theater, where he made considerable money. The business was rife with drugs, women, and lavish limo rides. Despite the challenges, he could return to his family for additional financial support to keep his business afloat. The legacy of Eddie Jackson and Courtney Brown is intricate. Courtney Jr. acknowledges his mistakes, particularly getting caught, but he also values the opportunities he had to see the world. His role models were from a different era, and he now recognizes that a better path exists today. Courtney Jr. expressed disdain for glorified informants like Frank Lucas, who ultimately betrayed their associates. He believes that if one cannot withstand the pressures of the criminal world, they should not enter it. True loyalty and resilience are rare qualities, and he respects those who remain steadfast. Reflecting on his life, Courtney Jr. appreciates the unique opportunities he had, from traveling the world to mingling with influential figures like Prince and Fortune 500 executives. These experiences were partly due to his father's lifestyle and the opportunities it afforded him. Unlike many gangster movies where families send their children off to success, Courtney Jr.'s family genuinely achieved this transformation. They are a testament to the possibility of rising above their past and finding success in legitimate endeavors. As a 46-year-old man, Courtney Jr. understands that life comes with both bitter and sweet moments. He and his sister often wonder what life would have been like if their father had kept driving the bus. It wasn't in the cards, and their lives unfolded as they did. This story is no different from many in America, although history often leaves out the experiences of black families like theirs. While Joseph Kennedy became an ambassador, Eddie Jackson didn't, despite being remembered as one of the best on Detroit's streets. Crime, like tobacco, has been a commodity in economic terms, and while not condoning it, Courtney Jr. points out that many have played on that field. He doesn't separate their story from that of other immigrant groups in America, like the Jews or the Irish, who also used organized crime to climb the economic ladder. The jury is still out on what will happen to African American families involved in serious crime and their children. These trials and tribulations are part of the journey from neighborhoods like Black Bottom or Paradise Valley to professional and entrepreneurial worlds. In many cases, including theirs, that bridge has been built by activities in the underworld. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, push the bell icon for notifications, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. Until next time,